welcome to Wild Wine Life. This is a most exciting episode. Uh, as a person who's totally into wine and history, I get to have Frederick J. Ryan Jr., the author of Wines of the White House. And just a little background, you were an Air Force brat. You enjoyed a little bit of your youth in Italy. You worked in the Reagan White House. You were the publisher and CEO of the Washington Post, served as President Reagan's post-presidential chief of staff, founding CEO of Political. Currently, you're the chairman of the board of directors at the White House Historical Association. You're on the board of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and wine committee of the Metro Club of Washington, D.C. You've also edited Wisdom and Humor of the Great Communicator and Ronald Reagan, the Great Communicator. You also have a wonderful wife, Genevieve, and 3 daughters. And from one Aries born in year of the goat to another, welcome to Wild Wine Life.
Thank you, Ray. I've been looking forward to this.
For years, I've wanted to do or told people about a wine dinner, Wines of the White House, that it's a non-political thing, it's a historical thing. And trying to find a list was impossible. I was talking to Daniel Shanks years ago, and he goes, they don't have a list. He goes, they send out a press release, a little thing, but I was amazed at how many wineries don't keep real records of it. And can you tell us what made you write this book and explain the importance of even listing some of the wines used at the White House and why it is so important?
Well, thanks, Ray, and thanks again for letting me be on your podcast. The reason behind the book was we've all seen there are so many biographies of presidents, first ladies. There are the White House Historical Association, which is a nonprofit group that educates the public about the White House. Had published so many books about the art in the White House and the music in the White House, the food in the White House and architecture of the White House. And I said, wait a minute, why don't we do a book about the wines of the White House? And they went to the publication committee and they came back and they said, we think it's a fantastic idea and you write it. So that became my project. It started off intending to be something much more modest, shorter. As you know, the book weighs about 5.5 pounds because it's 450 pages long. And the reason is because I kept finding more and more information, and there'd never been a book on this subject. And I thought, well, if I've learned this, I might as well put it in there. So it's quite comprehensive. But to answer your question, I had the same curiosity. What are the wines that have been served over the years in the White House? And we were able to go all the way back to the modern presidency, to the Truman administration, and begin to show every single wine that's been served at an official event, up to and including the present, every state dinner, every major event. And that's the last chapter of the book. So for the wine enthusiasts, if you want to know what wines Eisenhower drank, or Nixon, or Reagan, or Obama, they're all in there. And then just before that, you talk about White House meals. A lot of people I have found like to recreate a White House state dinner. And they get the menu and they find the current release of the wines that were served, and then they cook the same foods that were served. They go to a restaurant or they'll go to a club or something. So I included a number of those menus. I have found people love to do that. They'll mix and match. They'll say, here's the entree that the Kennedys served, and here's the dessert the Obamas served, and here's Reagan's soup, and here's the wines from this. So it's just become a way for people to have a lot of fun with wines and history.
I agree. I've suggested it as fundraisers for literacy things, just to enjoy election returns or just enjoy American history in general. And it's really neat to do that because it's the people's house. Yes. And it's neat to see how things have evolved. One of the things Daniel Shanks told me years ago was that the White House does not really have a wine cellar. It's more of a closet. And you go into this in the book, that the average wine collector probably has more wines in their basement than what is stored in the White House.
That's right. That was one of the big surprises, I think, to many of us who are wine enthusiasts, because I did a lot of research on this, and I found uh, the Queen of England, or now the King of England, has roughly 40,000 bottles in the Royal Cellar. The President of France has roughly 20,000 bottles at the Elysee Palace, the state residence. And I thought, well, we're the United States. We've got to have, for sure, have the best, biggest cellar. And I had this vision that it would be this big vaulted room with high ceilings and racks and cases everywhere, and maybe a bottle of Thomas Jefferson's wine lying over in the corner or something. And as you said, it turns out there is no wine cellar. It's a closet. It'll hold a couple of hundred bottles. They buy the wine now on an event by event basis. So if there's a state visit coming up, they'll buy the wines a couple weeks in advance for that state visit. And then there are a few bottles in little slots on the wall in case a guest of the president's over and like to have a glass of wine. But there is no White House wine cellar today. There was historically, when the White House was built, Thomas Jefferson was the second White House resident. George Washington ordered the White House. John Adams was the first president to live there. And then Thomas Jefferson moved in. And when Jefferson moved in, it was still in kind of like a punch list type thing. There were a lot of things that weren't done. And he said, where's the wine cellar? And there wasn't one. So he built the first wine cellar. He built it right under the north portico of the White House. And if anybody would like to see what it looks like, he built a replica out at Monticello, his home out in Virginia. And I actually have a diagram of it in the wine book. So you can see what the first White House wine cellar looked like.
Wow. You mentioned that I was working with a national sales manager that started off in D.C. with the wholesaler. And you mentioned that the wines are bought specifically for the event. What I thought was interesting is and I hope I'm not giving away secrets here, but he said the Secret Service shows up to to the warehouse. Everybody has to leave. The Secret Service pulls the wines, puts them on a sealed truck, and then sends them to, I think it's Bethesda Naval Station.
Well, you can never have people know that which bottles are going to be served at the White House, right? Just for security reasons. So it's usually done very low key. And for those whose wines are served at the White House, there's a informal or maybe even formal understanding that you don't use it for marketing purposes. Many of the wineries that have had their wine served will have a little exhibit, for example, in the tasting room or at the winery itself, showing the menus and maybe a couple of photos, and that's considered fine. But what they don't want is for you to slap a tag on your label saying "served at the White House by the president." So it's all done in a very kind of low-key way, and the goal with the wines at the White House today is to showcase the greatness of America. When there's a state visit, we try to find the best chef and the best food. We want to showcase entertainment, so there'll be a great American band or entertainer. They'll put together an interesting list of guests, and then we want to showcase American wine. And it's not necessarily today the most expensive wine or the cult wine or the most in demand or highest rated wine. It's a wine that the White House thinks would be interesting to show to our guests. Sometimes it pays homage to our guest. If the guest is from a country where there's an American winery with a winemaker from that country, sometimes they'll serve it. For example, when the British come, sometimes they'll serve wines that are American wines, but there's a British winemaker. Or when the Italians come, they'll have an American wine with an Italian-American winemaker. So it's a way to connect with the guest.
We will be right back with more Wild Wine Life. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to check out Mr. Fred's book, Wines of the White House. I'm Ray. Don't forget to live the dream, and here's to living the wild wine life.